As women, we comprise 52% of the population in this country, but we make up only 23% of state legislatures, 24% of statewide elective offices, 16% of Congress. And if you look at where the United States ranks in the world in terms of women in our national legislative body, so that's women in our Congress. Any guesses on where we rank? Top, middle, bottom? Bottom. We rank 68th between Zimbabwe at 67 and Turkmenistan at 69. So, as you said, that puts us at the bottom in terms of Western industrialized countries. And at the current rate of change, it's going to take a full century for us to reach parity in Congress. So, it's very important, Joan, that you and I get elected. That's right. Now, why the disparity? There are a number of reasons that you all know because you run for office, many of you. But it is true that women face different challenges when we run for office than men do. And that was really brought home to me when I first started running for governor in 1996. I remember I was dressed up. It was early in the campaign, not long after I had announced, and I was going out for a day of campaigning, but I was starting by interviewing somebody to be my media consultant. Two women, actually. Mandy Grunwald, who many of you know, she's working on Hillary's campaign now, did her Bill Clinton earlier, and a woman named Marla Romash. And so I was all dressed up because I was going out to campaign that day, and I went into this interview to interview them, and Marla took one look at me and she said, "Get rid of that pocketbook." Governors don't carry pocketbooks. Of course, after I got elected governor, my state troopers carried my pocketbook. We know that women candidates start by facing an electorate where male voters prefer male candidates, and women voters are ambivalent about gender. Research shows that senior citizens, who until recently have been the demographic who is most likely to vote in an election, are the least likely to vote for women. Voters see men as more decisive and better leaders, and they tend to view women candidates as less able than men to deal with hard issues. Those things like fiscal and economic policy, foreign affairs, and national security. But they see us as better on what are often known as the soft issues, things like education, health care, social services. They see us as more ethical, which was actually a huge benefit in 2006 because the electorate was very concerned about corruption in Washington. And most of all, voters don't believe that women are as tough as men. And they see toughness and strength as two different issues when it comes to women. So one of the things that we have to do, particularly running for executive office, is to prove our toughness credentials and be tough without being abrasive, which of course is the other challenge that we all know that women face. I had the good fortune as a state senator in New Hampshire to work on a couple of things that helped prove my toughness credentials. I took on a utility in our state, the largest utility, a company named Public Service Company, and had a great cartoon in one of the newspapers at the time where they had me as a little tiny figure with a sword and a public service company as a dragon. Slaying the dragon. I mean, that's the kind of ad cartoon you want in a newspaper.
That's right.
The other issue that helped with that toughness was taking on an insurance company over health insurance reform. And I had the good fortune to have the insurance company have a name, Golden Rule. So some of you may have dealt with Golden Rule Insurance Company in the past, so you know they're pretty awful insurance companies. But toughness is one of the real challenges that we have as women, showing that we can be tough and get the job done. It's an issue that I think cut against me when I ran for the United States Senate in 2002 against the opponent who I will be running against again this year, John Sununu. It's one of the things that cut against women across the country that year, the issues of national security and the threat, homeland security, the threat to this country. I thought it was particularly interesting in that race because as governor, I had done a lot more to respond on national security after September 11th than my opponent, who had been in Congress and hadn't really done much of anything on that issue. But that record didn't stick with voters. Now, we're not only perceived differently by the electorate, but we also are often covered differently by the press, as many of us here know. If you look at the media coverage of Elizabeth Dole's 2000 presidential candidacy, there's an interesting report that you can get if you go on Rutgers, Center for American Women in Politics website, where some political scientists have really studied the coverage of that 2000 campaign. And they showed that Dole received less coverage than candidates polling poorer than she was, so than John McCain, for example. And that the press generally paid more attention to her appearance and personality traits than to her positions on the issues. I find it very interesting that there's been all of this talk and writing about Hillary Clinton's belly laugh. Is there anybody here who thinks that would be a story if she were a man? No. Another thing that we know is different about women than men when we run for office is that women, particularly in my generation, have tended to be motivated by issues more often than the desire to run for office. I found it striking when I was at the Institute of Politics. I would bring in a group of students, Harvard students, and if I asked all of the students in the room, how many of you want to run for office someday? Almost every male hand in the room would go up, but maybe 20 to 30% of the female hands in the room. There has been a different approach that women have had to running for office, and something that I think is important for us, particularly those of us who are currently in office, to encourage young women to think about running for office.